Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. In last week's videos on Thursday, we talked quite a bit about drought and the evolution of drought and kind of what got us into the drought picture we're currently in now. And we're going to pick up with that discussion at the beginning of this video. So you're looking again at a map. I love showing these from Iowa State. It's total precipitation ranks by climate district, and I've started this on January 1st, and it goes up until yesterday. And your eye is drawn to those regions that are really dry, like most of Montana, getting into Wyoming, and then cutting here into the western Corn Belt. There's a large area in through here that, due to favoring a lot of northwest jet stream flow, has been robbed of a lot of moisture. Our systems have tended to do most of their development in parts of the mid-south and then run up through New England. Lately, that's brought some very heavy rain down here from the lower Mississippi River Valley along the Gulf Coast. We've seen these numbers shrinking, which is a good thing. That removes the drought stress in that area. But with these systems forming so far to the east, we've really continued to see degradation in the drought in parts of Texas. Now, of course, the one place that we have to really discuss is what's been happening in southern Oregon through parts of Idaho, Nevada, California having its dry start to the year. Same thing for Utah and Arizona. This has been a region that, as we've stated, without a strong subtropical component of the jet stream, that's that southwest flow from this direction, we will just continue to miss out on the precipitation that's needed. Let's dig in here a little bit more because we talked about this western Corn Belt, western plains issue in last week's video. So looking at the reservoir status right now, we can see that the two big ones like Lake Shasta and Lake Oroville, Shasta is currently at 38% of full pool and Oroville is at 47% of full pool, which means that we're nearing the end of the wet season, which would basically tell us here that because of how low these are and the fact that snowpack this year has just flatlined once we began the new year. Take a look. I mean, this was where we were at the beginning of the year, matching some of our snowiest years on record. We've essentially flatlined since then. Currently, there's 33 inches, here in total when you add this whole region up, all of these different snow stations combined in this area. So the concern there becomes of where we sit with snowpack, because that's the other place where the water is, right? So it's in the reservoirs and it's in the snowpack. And using here some of the data from the Department of Water Resources out of California, we see some of the numbers are a pretty dire situation here. Just blow this up a bit. The Northern Sierra at 31% of the April 1st average and percent of normal for this date. The Central Sierra at 43%, and the Southern Sierra at about 43%. So our snowpack in the west is just not where it needs to be this time of year to buy us time as it melts and it goes into those reservoirs, which are already pretty low. So that's why we were quite excited to see finally this cutoff low we've now been talking about for about 10 days, this closed low, making its way into California. Just looking here at some of the radar data all day today, just bringing the rain into Central Valley of California, hit the coast. Some places here picking up quite a bit of precipitation out of this. And it's going to be this system here that's going to be responsible for kicking off our next big system in the midsection of the country. But before we talk about that, I just want to point out we had quite a bit of lake effect snow this weekend, and we can still see today on radar throughout the middle of the afternoon here on Monday, where we still had some more of that lake effect snow. So some places here are really getting hit with all that cold air on the back side of it. So what I want to talk about is this. This is where we just came from. So as of midnight on Monday morning, this was the previous 7 days total precip, and that meant a multi-day severe weather outbreak in the south. We saw some pretty heavy snows north and some very wet conditions in the midsection of the country. And I'm going to kind of paint a story here or put together a picture that says I think we're going to see a repeat of this. I think there's reason to think that the atmosphere is going to continue to stay in this mode. And what I don't like about that is that means that places that are in deficit on soil moisture, given the way the pattern is going to set up, I don't have much cause to say that they're going to see major relief. So the places I see things better for are these areas. What I'm worried about is this part of Texas, getting into western Kansas, much of Nebraska, South Dakota, getting up into parts of Wyoming, Wyoming, but really Montana. I expect improvement east of here. Most of these areas to the east, I do expect improvement. But you can see the problems we're having in central Oregon, along the coast, and down here into California with the soil moisture values down there at 40 centimeters or 16 inches, continuing to show major drought stress at this point. So that's the narrative. We're going to basically look for what would keep the pattern consistent with what it's been, or if there is going to be a break in it, what that might look like. Because you look back over the last 30 days, And we can now really pick out the regions that have seen quite a bit of precipitation and those that have not. Where this becomes problematic is with the pattern I'm about to explain to you, is really going to be down here in the lower Mississippi River Valley. This is an area that we want to be actively planting, parts of the eastern Corn Belt getting into the southeast. These are also areas where things really need to get going. And we're going to talk about the temperature pattern throughout the rest of the Corn Belt and northeast. But you can see how dry it's been in this area, how very dry it's been in this part of Texas and the West Coast. All right, we turn our attention to the ocean temperature pattern because most of this winter, the narrative has really come from the transfer of momentum from the tropics into the extratropics, so the mid-latitudes. I want to bring you up to speed again on what's going on with La Nina. We've seen warming of the ocean temperatures here, okay, but we've seen cooling of them right here in the Central Pacific. And the reason for that is we've seen some relatively strong trade winds throughout March. And the biggest issue with this is that those trade winds have kept the MJO somewhere between this part of the Indian Ocean and right here just north of Australia. That would be like phases 3, 4, and a little bit into 5. Now here's why we care about that. If we could get the MJO to come way out over here, what it would end up doing is it would favor more troughs just offshore. Did you notice that just as of late, I'll show you this, the trade winds backed off. And the moment they backed off, the momentum in the jet came from Japan and finally put a system here. And that's the low that's going through California. But I mean, if these trade winds pick back up again and shove this all back to the east, we're going to go back to having a ridge here or a ridge here. It doesn't matter, just high pressure taking the jet stream flow like that. So that's the main story here is why, but also what is the impact of seeing this La Nina as it fades surge like this, okay? So I'm looking at trade winds again from today all the way through April 11th, and sure enough, we can see another surge of strong easterlies right here. They're going to push the MJO back into the Indian Ocean. And that's been something we've been attempting to forecast for a while, and now we're starting to get some verification of those ideas. So what I'm talking about here is the MJO keeps sweeping around like it did in the beginning or the middle of March. We've seen forecasts where it's like, no, swing it around like this. Or we saw the forecast last week that took it into null space and then tossed it out over here into phase 8 or 1. And I said the thing we have to look out for is once it gets into null space, does it crash back into phase 2, phase 3, and comes around again? And it appears that it's going to do that. Now, what that means kind of to the broader picture of the longer range forecast is that if it does that same loop again, that tends to give us the same set of circumstances we just saw from the end of February through March. And that would mean the wetter conditions are east, the cooler conditions are east, the risk of being dry is central plains to northern plains and California. So we look at all of this and we just come back to this picture of those surging trade winds. And we have some better evidence of that too, because if you look over here, first of all, okay, if we're going to see this happen again, we saw the ocean temperatures in Niña Region 1-2 go way up, and then they've come down. Are they going to shoot back up again? That would be a possibility with this pattern. What about Niña Region 3.4? That's out in the Central Pacific. So from January to early February, they came up, came back down into early March. They've bounced. It seems as though they might do this again, meaning that this La Nina will continue to linger a while longer into spring. Remembering that the only model right now that's keeping La Nina around beyond spring is the CFSV2, and we're going to look at that more in depth once we get into the new month of April when we have some new data from it. But what this all means in the near term, that's what we need to distill this down to, is this is the latest April 7 to May 7 forecast. And if you feel like you've seen this before, it's because it appears the pattern's going back to the way it was. I know some of you were reading my reports for the Northwest, and I said the models were, in my morning reports, were going a bit too wet. Well, now you see how they've backed off in Montana. They've gone drier along the West Coast. They've been drier in the Great Basin, and now we see this once again. And I think all of this is because the MJO is failing to get away from the Indian Ocean as the La Nina keeps its grip on things. Now, where we have flooding on the Red River Valley of the North, could we have more active weather there? Sure. Through the Great Lakes, yeah. Unfortunately, from the Mid-South and the Southeast into New England, we're trying to get planting done down here. We're trying to get field work done everywhere east of the Mississippi. And the models just say, keep bringing the systems in. And now we are going to get two systems that are going to come through the plains. Remember, we already had the first one. The second one's on its way, but we need more. And we don't want to see this drier signal for the Central Plains going forward. So we see that as what the longer-term kind of climate forcings are at this point. But I would like to offer a small kind of caveat to this picture, and that comes by way of looking at the jet stream level winds today. Now you're staring down on the North Pole. So here's the US and Alaska, there's Russia, now you can find Europe. And what I want to point out to you is that currently, with our jet stream pattern, we do not see any sort of substantial blocking, really anywhere. We had seen at times big Scandinavian blocks. We had that deep trough that was between the Hudson Bay and Greenland. That's kind of, it's still there in a sense, but it's not as though it's keeping the pattern stuck. And if you look out across the open Pacific, I mean, you got lots of waves coming through. So each one of these troughs is going to be a part of a system that will eventually have to come across the US. Here's the issue. The trajectory is like this, and then they bounce, they eject. It's not as though they're coming into the west and making the turn here. They're coming in like this and making the turn there. So that keeps the eastern half of the country wet, but it does not support the development of these systems far enough to the west to really just wipe out the drought in the central part of the United States. Now, we've had some improvement in places, but not an elimination of the drought. We need this jet stream pattern to make that occur, this one right here. All right. So that's why today we're in good shape. But we got to get more of these. But each one of these next waves comes in too far to the north. That's a part of the story. And so we also have to ask this. Are we going to go back to seeing, troughs originating here, running over the ridge and then diving? Because there has been at times big high pressure parked off here over the last month. This is a real distinct possibility going into the month of April. Now, what does all that mean? That tends to mean we're drier and more mild on this side of the Rockies. We're mild west of the Rockies, and we're cold. We're cold into parts of the Corn Belt, into the Great Lakes and east, and that also includes the Canadian Prairie. That's what a repeat of this pattern would be. Now, today, we're not getting that. Today, look at this. Big high pressures in place here. So yeah, it's cold east, but all of this warmth returning, those winds out of the south are bringing really warm temperatures back into this area. I'll show you what they are in a few seconds. But we just have to ask, how long into the future do we keep seeing these shots at really cold air coming into this part of the eastern part of the United States? Okay, so let's get into it. First of all, there is fire risk today because of those southerly winds with all of the dry conditions here, and this will go into this evening. So we're talking about humidity levels here that are in that 5 to 20% range. We even had fire risk over here in the east as well. In fact, all of this shading you see in through here was fire weather watch, and we even had a red flag warning. And it's interesting, we got another shot at some cold air here coming and giving us another freeze warning. But do you see the shading of color right in through here? That is all red flag warning into this region. And throughout the west, a lot of wind warnings or wind advisories and a winter weather watch on just a few inches of snow here in the Sierra Nevada. Now, I'm watching this carefully to see if any fires showed up today. So this is some satellite imagery through this afternoon. And other than what I see right here in Oklahoma, let's take a look right there. I didn't see too much today, which is good given that the conditions are pretty ripe for it, especially in the western high plains. So where this is all going to go in the next couple of days is this. We see the system coming into the west. It's actually going to phase with a short wave here that's coming through parts of Montana. And we do have moisture. This is great. Some moisture coming into Montana tonight into tomorrow morning. You'll then see that the system is starting to gather itself together into some low pressure just as it crosses the mountains. So we're going to be seeing some snow right here along the Front Range. And then as we go in, look, this is it. We need more systems like this. But like I said, the reason we got it is the jet stream finally came into California, not over the top like this. So that's why we got all this moisture back farther, because the system came from California, not from the northwest. But there it is anyway. And we're going to watch ice risk on the northern side of this, Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, the UP. This, by the way, is 1 a.m. Wednesday morning. And also on Tuesday night, this will be the first of a multi-day severe weather outbreak. It's going to start off first kind of centered on the Red River Valley of the South, and then it's going to move through the Mid-South. The problem with bringing this in is this is going to shut down any field work that was hoping to get done through here with a squall line of storms and also some very heavy precipitation. And then that system curls on into the Great Lakes area. This will be a multi-day ice event to the north, snow on the backside, windy conditions on the backside, and a line of storms that's going to just run through the Mississippi River Valley on its way to the east. Now from here, we got to take a look at the severe weather threat. So first thing I want to show you is, this is Tuesday. So I record these on Monday evening. This is the region on Tuesday we're watching. You saw that in that squall line, that long frontal squall line here. And on Wednesday, we're going to be hitting that same area that a week ago we saw the tornadoes down here coming out of Louisiana, Arkansas, into Mississippi and Alabama. By the time we get into Thursday, we're going to watch parts of the mid-Atlantic for our severe storm risk. To pick up where the high-res models leave off, let's go now to our multi-model analysis, GFS on the left, European on the right. Both models performing quite similarly. So we see they have the same timing on the first system, the one that comes right in through here. Pretty good. I mean, that's pretty well matched through early Wednesday morning. And that system, as we already saw, curls through the Great Lakes. You can see the frontal squall line to its south. This will be Wednesday night. And then as we go out there into Thursday, a lot of snow pulling in on the backside of this. And you can now see where that frontal boundary is in through here. So heavy snows in the UP, northern Wisconsin, this part of Ontario, and getting into northern Minnesota. So keep an eye on that. That front then clears, and there's a little short wave that sneaks in behind it. See it right here? This is now Friday evening. And that one comes through. It's in both models, pretty well resolved in both models. And it sweeps right through the western Corn Belt and eventually goes to the Great Lakes. So if you just kind of see that second system late this week and early this weekend. Now, the models have been toying with the idea of the development of a coastal low down here, but really it's just going to be flow coming around like this for Saturday into Sunday. See that? But the latest model trends took all this moisture and sent it further to the south, and you can see in the GFS it's almost not there. But if we get past that, let's now go out there to Sunday. See where our next system came through here in the European? Came in just like this. So it's not drawn in deep on this moisture. It's not even well resolved in the GFS, by the way. But the models are attempting to invigorate another system on about April 4th, 5th. And we need to once again see how far back to the west it can pull that moisture. Because if you notice in both models, it really tries to keep it farther to the east, starting in the mid-south rather than in the plains. Now that gets us out beyond about a week in the weather forecast runs. But let me kind of put some clarification to this. Let's go with the European first. When I play it through, that's system number one. Is there risk of flooding from Oklahoma, through Missouri, Illinois, Indiana? There is. There's a good chance that some places in here pick up 2 inches. The storms over the south will be severe and possibly put down some heavy rain. So that system plays through, and then you notice right down here, the next system sweeps through, bringing in some precip as that little clipper runs right through the western Corn Belt. I'm just going to keep playing this though to show you. The European model tries to toss another system. This would be next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Not real well resolved just yet, but you see where it's adding it right down here? To see how well resolved it actually is though in the models, I want to show you 2 maps here. This would be the European Ensembles forecast, looking at the probability of getting 1 inch of rain through the next 10 days. So large area that's already wet, getting more precipitation. A lot of this is snow. Now let's flip this up and show you the probability of getting 2 inches of precipitation. Again, there's a large area through here that would want to be doing a lot of early season field work, planting, get everything done, and we're still looking here at better than 50 to 70% chance of 2 inches of precip. Now, earlier I kind of showed you the pattern is open and unblocked, and I want to show you what I mean by that. You see, this is already out there on April 4th. Trough. In fact, I can count 5 waves in the overall pattern around the northern hemisphere. So going out there to the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, does that look familiar? Look at that ridge in the west, trough in the east, so cold here to start April. But the pattern stays open. So what happens to this ridge? What happens to this trough? Well, by the 9th, 10th, and 11th, see how the pattern moves. And now we see this happening, and we have a ridge here. And what that would tell me is to tell all of you that that April 12th, 13th, 14th, should this materialize, that's going to give us another round of severe weather. Question is, does this trough dig into California or does it come out of the northwest? The result would be a low forming here or here. That's the difference we're trying to stress in this video. If it comes out of the northwest, the low forms over the mid-south and runs this direction. If it comes through California, it forms in the high plains. We need these. That's what we need. So what do the models do with it? Well, the week 2 precip, they keep the wettest conditions here, where it's already been wet. And the only reason why you're showing up drier in this area is because most of that time period, the jet stream pattern looks something like that. So there's convergence here. So it's going to show drier. What I showed you is all the way out there around the 13th, 14th, that time period is when it makes the flip. So we might see much more active weather at that point. Okay, let's talk temperatures. We'll do a little bit of international weather and we'll wrap this one up. Next 7 days, everywhere that you see gray here, that's where the National Digital Forecast Database has got a frost coming. And also I just want to show you, I put this in my morning reports. I've got a couple of new tools to take a look at. So first of all, temperatures. You've seen these maps before. So that southerly wind bringing in all that warm air here plus some downslope compression, very mild, while we're quite cold east, which we saw the lake effect snow. Well, there's Tuesday. Warm sector opens up in a big way on Wednesday. Remember, that's when we had all the storms running from the Midwest to the Mid-South, and then the cold air that wraps in behind this, and that was the snow that we were talking about. So that moves east, and then by Friday into Saturday, we're trapped into that pattern. Remember, that's doing something a bit like this. So there's more mild conditions west and cooler conditions here. Now here's the new thing I've been building for, and I've been linking this in my morning report. I only have it centered on the Midwest right now. I'm just testing this out, but this is 4-inch soil temperatures forecast by the European model. And what we've got here is through this week, we're starting to see those temperatures really warm up, but it's still too early. This is on the 30th. After this system rolls through, just take a look at Iowa as an example. 7 a.m. Friday morning, this Friday, we already have those 4-inch soil temperatures back down to freezing. So we're still quite a ways away from a really warm, a really mild shot that's going to bring the soil temperatures up where we can aggressively plant. Because even as we look out there into day 5 through 10, okay, you start to see some mild conditions here, but they don't seem to want to hang around. The pattern being open, we bring in another kind of shot at some cooler air as we get out there to the middle of the month of April. That's what we're looking out to, okay? If the pattern's going to break, I think it's not going to break fully away from this until we get past about the 11th, 12th, 13th of the month of April. And what we're going to shake is the colder weather we have out here, which you can see from the European model sticks around all the way to about the 11th or 12th. It's still out there. Whoops, it's still out there at that time period. So possibly after that we break over mild, and this gives us a much better shot at getting this crop going. All right, from here, let's go here. I would like to talk about South America very quickly. The map that you see up here that I'm hovering over, this is the 1-month drought indicator from Chirps. We've been very dry in eastern Brazil, from Goiás to Minas Gerais, parts of Bahia, and even southern Tocantins. You can see that in some places this is approaching very dry conditions. In the south, talking about from Mato Grosso do Sul to Paraná, Santa Catarina, and Rio Grande do Sul, very, very wet weather. And that goes over into parts of Paraguay, northern Argentina as well. In fact, let's go look at Argentina real quick. You can see eastern Paraguay and a big section of Argentina has had flooding rains. Now, you know that before this, right? We talked about all the drought that was in place here. Well, all of those things I told you earlier about the MJO failing to get to phase 7-8 and resetting in the Indian Ocean means that we keep that pattern going. So the next 15 days starts to have an impact on about 20 to 25% of the Safrinha corn crop here. Okay, very wet in the south where they're still planting a Safrinha corn crop, believe it or not, down here in south. And even though you're seeing drier conditions in Argentina, they just came off of wetter conditions. What I'm suggesting here is that this is going to start to impact about a quarter of the Safrinha crop grown in South America, which will likely limit the total production out of the country. So that's just another thing that's going to tighten up these global supplies. So I wanted to bring that to your attention and tell you that a lot of this, again, much of my forecast comes down to how does this La Nina continue to push those trade winds around? Because it's affecting the transport of heat momentum north, and it's also affecting what's going on in Brazil too. All right, we'll wrap it up there, and I'll talk to you again on Thursday. Thanks.